Well, I'll ask a question then. So were you married before moving to Mexico? You're in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
We met in the AIM program,
Okay.
the missions program.
Yeah, we had one of our students here did AIM and loved
Is that
it.
Tristan's? What
Yep.
Tristan did?
Okay, how do I say this city of Mexico?
Many have tried. It's not super easy. It's Querétaro.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen. I'll default to you on that.
Say it. Try it.
Querétaro.
There you go. It's pretty close.
Okay, today we have something special. One of my good friends named Erik Bishop, who's a missionary in Mexico, is with us today to talk about missions in particular. And we're very excited about that. Been looking forward to that for a long time. Erik grew up the son of a Church of Christ preacher and lived in all sorts of places in the Midwest. Lived in Oklahoma and Kansas and Wyoming and Texas until he eventually joined AIM Ministries, Adventures in Missions, that program. That's where he met his wife, Neva, who he is married to still. They both served in Latin America, Erik in Brazil and Neva in Bolivia. And after this, they returned to Lubbock, Texas and got married. At this point, Erik began studying at Sunset Bible Institute and Neva at a local community college to focus on social work. And while they were there, they formed a team and decided to plant a church in a city in Mexico whose name I'm not very confident saying, so I'll let Erik tell you in a moment. And they've been there over 2 years now and are currently working with a house church that sits at around 15 or 20 people that they've built from nothing, along with learning the language and all the things that come with foreign missions. And so we want to welcome Erik in. Erik, first tell us the name of the city that you're in, so since I can't say it very well.
Querétaro.
Yeah,
It's a
that's what it is.
yeah, it's a pretty difficult name, but we actually live in a northern suburb called Juriquilla, which is about 35,000 people. So it's kind of its own
Wow.
city in its own right. Querétaro
Yeah.
itself is between 1 million and 2 million. No one really knows because it's growing so fast, and also the fact that where do you stop including the city? Like, because there's all these different suburbs growing around it. So quite a few people overall.
Yeah, so you're in significant cities. That's metropolitan sort of areas, huh?
Yeah, but it's pretty nice because where we are, like I said, in Juriquilla, kind of has all of its own things. So I don't have to really go outside to get a lot of the main stuff. We do ministries and do different things downtown or other places, but
Yeah.
we're kind of able to get everything we need in our area.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there like a city that you think of in America that would be comparable to that we could think of to say it's kind of like living in this place? Is there any place like it, or is it altogether different being in Mexico?
Um, it's pretty different. I'm trying to think. I've never really been in a city of this size. Mostly where I've lived in the States is quite a bit smaller. The only other time I've lived in a metropolitan was when I lived in Brazil. So yeah, but just think of a city of about 1 million people
Yeah.
that has all the good things and bad things of a city of 1 million people.
And how did you guys end up in that city in particular? Were you assigned to that city, or how did that work?
No, so we formed a team after going through the AIM program. We came back and got married in Lubbock. And when we were there, we formed a team with some people. And with them, we kind of looked through some different places and we talked to people. Like we were looking at Brazil, Bolivia, Canada, even the northeast of the US. Like my wife and I felt really called to the US as well. So we were looking kind of all over. And it was really that Mexico seemed to open up a lot, especially being one of our teammates is Mexican. And a majority of our team already spoke Spanish from doing AIM in Spanish speaking countries. So that really opened that door. And then we talked to some people here in Mexico who really suggested our city because of how much it was growing and also how safe it is.
Yeah.
So um, even our city, a lot of people think of Mexico as dangerous, of course, which there are definitely parts, but our city is safer than even the city I lived in Texas, than Lubbock, a city of about 300,000. Pretty much every metric is safer here than there. So that's kind of interesting.
Why
Yeah.
why do you think that it's growing so fast? Is there something that's attributing to that?
Yeah, so a lot of people are moving here from Mexico City because Mexico City is super overpopulated. There's earthquakes that, and just the general I don't know, state of living there. So a lot of people from Mexico City are moving, but a lot of things that are bringing people here are the same things that brought us here. Is it's really safe, really clean, a lot very modern, and there's a lot of businesses, especially foreign businesses. So companies from Europe, from Asia, from the US, from Canada that are making factories around here that are doing different things. So in our area where we actually live, we'll see it's very common to see Korean people, Canadians, other Europeans as well. So um, a lot of those bring in a lot of industry as well.
Yeah, well, that's a wonderful place to plant a church.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and the fact that pretty much everyone here, even the Mexicans that are here, are not from here, most of them. So a lot of people are already uprooted and looking for community, which really helps to kind of make connections and offer a community in that way.
So you were a preacher's kid. So were you always a Christian? Did you have when did you become a Christian? Have you kind of been one as long as you can remember? What did that look like when you come into faith?
Yeah, I would say I mean, being a preacher's kid, I was in the church building anytime the doors were open, and even when they weren't. Um, and always the last one to leave, always that kind of thing. But I would say I was definitely became a Christian when I was 12 years old, was baptized and all of that, and went to church camp, went to church youth group, all that stuff. But I didn't um, kind of the journey to faith was really more when I went to college and had a time where I fell away in the sense of I just didn't really know what I wanted to believe. I need kind of paving my own faith rather than just the faith of my parents and my peers. So I would say that was probably a time when it was when I was in Wyoming at the University of Wyoming, where I in a way lost my faith to find my faith. I kind of had to branch off and sort of experience life without the church before I realized, oh, this faith is actually important to me, and kind of finding um, my own faith.
Yeah, so you kind of did deconstruction in the healthy way, where you deconstruct your old faith and reconstruct with a stronger faith that's really your own.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, it was that because there's always this expectation you're the preacher's kid, you got to be the one up there leading songs or doing all the different things, and it never was really um, my choice. It was more just kind of what was expected, and I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get into full-time mission work? Was that always something you kind of thought about? Was that part of your life? Was it brand new? What caused that?
No, it was not on the radar at all. So, kind of it's a long story, but a short-ish version of it was there was a man that would go on mission trips to Haiti in my church in Wyoming, and he would go and come back and talk about them, and they just really pricked my heart. I really wanted to go to Haiti, which Haiti being a very poor and dangerous country, it's kind of hard for a teenager to go. But I ended up going with my dad, and I was by far the youngest person there. I could only go with my dad because we were going to places that were really hard to reach and doing like food distributions in villages where it got dangerous. It was where we were told never to take a baby because if someone
Wow.
would try to hand you a baby and they would run,
Wow.
hoping you would take the baby back with you. Like it was,
No kidding.
so it was a very
Man, we could
eye-opening
talk about
experience.
that. Yeah, we could talk about that the rest of the time. That's wild. I hadn't heard of
Yeah,
that.
no, but it really opened my eyes to it was my first cross-cultural experience, and it really opened my eyes because there was these people who lived in extreme poverty but had such strong faith. They were so kind and they had joy, but they were also very generous. They were wanting to give us things, like give us food and different things when they had hardly anything, and we have many more things, which was really humbling and really kind of started me down the path of wanting to understand and get to know different cultures. So I still, even after that experience, I was like, okay, I'll probably just do mission trips every once in a while. I wanted to be a physical therapist, so that's why I went to University of Wyoming. But it was kind of out of that in that low point where I lost faith and kind of coming back to it that I felt called to missions. And having my dad went to SIBI, Sunset International Bible Institute, which is where AIM is. So I grew up always knowing about AIM. And that was kind of what seemed like the best way to kind of refine my footing in a way forward. And then so it was kind of a mentorship program where I went and was in Brazil for a year and a half and ended up falling even more in love with missions from there. And then yeah, from there I knew I wanted to continue to do that. So that's why I went back to Sunset and continued studying, looked for a team, and ended up here in Mexico.
Yeah, that's wonderful. One of the things I get asked most often about mission work is how to. I had someone in my office a couple of days ago actually that asked, "How do I know if I'm being called to missions?" And I love that sort of language of being called to it, and you use it as well. Would you say that maybe the largest portion of that was that you just felt like you had a godly desire for that God had placed that desire in you? What all kind of played into that call for you?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I use the word call. We use it figuratively, but this in this sense it was actually literal. I had been thinking about. I was at this low point. We're also in my college degree at that point, where I just wasn't going anywhere in my faith in life really. And I had been thinking, and I had told no one. I had been thinking about missions in my head, but I had told no one, no
Mm.
one. And within the same week, two different people who had not talked to each other both called and brought up missions on their own.
Wow.
Which again, so
So you got a
it was
literal
just
call with your
yeah. So
spiritual
in a lot
call.
of ways,
Yeah.
I felt like it was a very literal um, call,
That's
but
awesome.
it came also just from again that passion I had when I just had that cross cultural experience, experiencing people from a different place, that I really just wanted to get to know them, understand them,
Mm.
and have a community with them. So a lot of those things played into it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, um, moving kind of more, I guess, philosophically, or the philosophy of missions. Why do we call it mission work? Right? What mission are we talking about? We know what we're talking about when we say mission work, but when you understand, when you think of the mission of mission work, or what that means, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, actually, I want to kind of throw this one back at you guys first. Just when I say the word mission work, what pops into your head?
Other countries? Yeah, I mean, I think about sort of exciting, life on the edge, evangelism. I mean, that's what just kind of naturally comes to mind. Caleb?
Yeah. I think my mind's been changed on this a lot as I've gotten older, but like the gut reaction mission work is you imagine people like hiking through the jungle and bringing Bibles, translating Bibles, and handing them to people who have never read the Word before. And that's like when I hear mission work, that's where my brain goes. But the missionaries that I've met over the course of the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, most of them are just living their lives in these places with the purpose of teaching the gospel to people and building community.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of times we've kind of formed mission or mission work into something that's over there.
Yeah.
Very much missions has become something that's over there.
Mm.
How a church partakes in missions is by sending money to someone who went over there or people who are from over there.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we think of mission work as in, okay, that's the people who are going and doing the work over there. But I would challenge that idea because as Christians, are we not all called to mission?
Mm.
So missions or being a missionary isn't a biblical concept, at least by the word of it.
Yeah.
There's no time the Bible says the word missionary. We just kind of picked up the Greek miseo is like to send. So we kind of just took that and were like, all right, missions, just kind of like apostles were the ones who were sent. We're like, okay, missions.
Yeah.
But the problem is when we only exclude it to people who are over there or people like me who are living in a different country, then it kind of takes the burden off of the church in the place where you're at, which
Yeah.
I would argue that missions is everywhere because it's God's mission. The church
Mm.
is on mission for God, spreading his kingdom, love, mercy, all of those different things. That is the mission of the church.
Yeah.
That
That's
is
great.
that's our role. That's what we're being called to do. So I find it problematic if it only becomes people who go other places. Like I said, a lot of doors open for us. We really didn't want to go to Mexico in the beginning. So it wasn't like we felt like we had to go to Mexico to do missions or to work for God. In a lot of ways, I was doing many of the similar things I do here in Lubbock when I lived there as well.
Yeah.
I'm working with teaching English as a second language and different things. So these are all things that can be done everywhere. Of course, it looks different in different places, different cultures, different languages. Um, but it can be a little bit of a cop out if we, as the church, only classify missions as over there.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that distinction of because I know that's how we think about it, whether we admit it or not. We think about missions as something that's a good. I love those words. That's a good way of saying it, as something over there, and that and not as something that we are doing here as well, and that we're called to here just as much as we're called to it there. That's a beautiful thing. Are there other sort of misconceptions you think of that the church may have, that Christians may have about missions, that maybe you have discovered through being in it is not exactly true, or maybe your life looks different than you thought it was going to look, or any of those things?
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of misconceptions about mission work. Um, Again, it was already kind of mentioned, the idea of like hiking through a jungle or doing these different things. The people I'm interacting with in Mexico are dentists, engineers, lawyers.
Yeah.
Like the people I interact with are very similar to probably the people you'd interact with on a daily basis. I had lunch with a friend at Denny's the other day. That's just down the road from my house. Like, so missions doesn't always look like going to some remote, desolate area and working, which there are those people who do that in certain places in the world. But no, missions, like was already kind of said, very much is just finding opportunity, a community, and doing your best to first learn about that community, understand them, and then sharing Jesus and his love, mercy, all those different things. I'm currently working on a missions degree, a master's, and my main advisor, he was a missionary for many years, and he really expressed that your job as a missionary, or as he would call it, a cross-cultural worker, your job is to learn for the first 3 years. Your job is to learn more than it is to teach. Like, obviously, there is going to be opportunities for teaching, but your main objective should be learning.
Yeah, that's great. And how long have you guys have been to Mexico for how long?
About a little over 2 years, coming up on 2.5 years.
Yeah, so really you still kind of feel like you're in that phase of really learning the culture well, and on the backside of that, certainly, but still kind of in that phase of learning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another thing. A lot of people might think more of a missionary as like kind of like a 9 to 5, whereas
Yeah.
being a missionary is much more non-traditional hours of, it's just when people are available, which ironically is kind of the opposite of 9 to 5, because most people are working the 9 to 5-ish time. So normally when we're doing ministries is either before or after those time periods when we can be with people.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, we could go on for a while of just different misconceptions about what it's like to live in a different country, or what even the goal of mission work is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of misconceptions, I think this has gone down some over the years, but a lot of times there's been misconceptions about what success is in a mission work.
Yeah.
It used to be much more, and still to some extent is, but how do you measure success? Is it baptisms?
Yeah.
That was kind of well, you need to have some baptisms to write home in your newsletter to show that you've been a successful missionary. But just, for example, here, some of the things I'm most proud of, relationships I'm most proud of, are connecting with people who are already Christians, but just haven't found a church home and hadn't been in a church in a long time.
Yeah.
That doesn't show up on the baptism numbers, or what would quantify success, or how many people come to our Friday night Bible study who have blatantly said they're not religious and don't really ever want to step foot in a church building, but we'll come to that.
Wow.
Like, for me, that's success.
Yeah.
Those are
absolutely.
really important things that are happening, but they're maybe not nearly as measurable as
Yeah.
sometimes, if you look at it very logistically. Okay, we're an American church, we send money so that they convert people.
Yeah.
The converted people will make up a church, and then that's how we know the money was well spent.
Yeah.
There's a lot more nuance in the process than a money to baptism ratio or anything of
Yeah.
that nature.
Man, that's great, Eric. I love that. And so often we let sort of the way the world defines success creep into the church, whether it be local churches like I'm a part of, or mission churches like you're a part of. And in mission work, and this idea that success is defined by numerical growth, and that's, I mean, it's such an issue in churches around us, and I think probably churches everywhere, that growth. When someone says, "Is your church growing?" all they mean is, "Do you have more people than you had a year ago?" And obviously that's a wonderful thing. We pray for that. If the Lord wills for that, that's great. But the primary goal as a local minister is to feed the sheep, for the sheep may grow spiritually, and pray for those that are in the community and try to help the church grow numerically. But the spiritual growth, like you're talking about, of helping Christians have a place to come and feed on the word and grow in fellowship and all these things, is such a significant thing, and is at least as significant very often as those sort of evangelistic more efforts. And I think very often we use the world's definition of success instead of God's definition of it, which is often simply faithfulness and spreading the seed, praying for God to grow, building relationships with people that we love and that He's placed around us, and allowing Him to do the rest.
One kind of final thing on that, I like to kind of define it or think of it as just thinking that God is already at work here before I got here. God was at work here before we got here. God was working at in these people's hearts before we ever met them, before we even knew them. So it's not really up to us to come and start this thing. Right. Really, it's us coming here to come alongside what God's already been doing and doing our best to serve alongside that.
That's great, Eric. Well, what is the Christian? Is there much Christian influence in the city? Are there churches? Were there other groups that were there already that were working that you are able to connect with? Anything like that?
Yeah, so there is definitely a strong Catholic presence is kind of the main, going to be like kind of the main foundation culturally as well. It's not just a religious item; it's a cultural item here.
Yeah,
so many people are culturally Catholic, or because through their family they're Catholic. But yeah, there definitely are some other churches around. It took us a little bit more time to kind of find them. Yeah. One of the reasons we chose this specific area is because we hadn't found really any. Just driving around the area, you don't really see any churches. You can find like one Catholic church, but even then we didn't really find it when we were surveying. Yeah. But so there definitely are Christians here, but a lot of the understanding of Christianity or the Bible come from the very strict Catholic background. Yeah. So a lot of people we run into when we begin talking about Jesus or God or the Bible or any of these different things, they're coming from a narrative, from a perspective that's kind of based in those things. So we kind of have to work backwards a little bit to explain kind of where we're coming from in a lot of this area.
The question, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, we did a lot of short-term missions like in our college age. And so we'd like to know what value or lack of value do you see, maybe compare and contrast value versus lack of value in short-term mission work versus doing what you're doing and being a part of the community and living there long-term?
So I think a lot of things to be understood about short-term mission work come from the idea of short-term mission work is more for the people going than the people receiving. Yeah. A large majority of the time, the people receiving short-term missionaries are going to have more work set out for them, setting up for that to happen, facilitating all of it, than the people coming. And then more than the people coming will alleviate from them in many of those cases. So a lot of times, short-term missions have to be evaluated by what is an actual need. Are we just sending a youth group there because that's what everyone does? You just send youth groups to an orphanage. But I think one of the most important things about short-term missions, because like I shared, I'm here now because of a short-term mission trip. Right. I went to Haiti and it really changed my whole view on things. But I think one of the most important things for short-term missions is to understand when you're going that it's more for you as the people going. Yeah. To see not only how does this other place, because it could be even in the States too, how does this other place, how does this other community, other country, what are they like? What can I learn from them? And also to begin reflecting on what things are happening here. What are some things I can do on this short-term mission trip? Like, oh, wow, I really liked helping at this orphanage. Or I really liked doing this helping teach English or distributing food or whatever it is, connecting that back home of there's people in my community I can do that with. More likely than not, many of those things are things you can do back home as well.
Yeah.
And also, again, helping them to realize that, because a lot of problems with just missions in general is kind of the savior complex. The Western missionary is the savior coming to fix. We have the resources, we have the stuff, we have the knowledge. We're just going to go graciously give it to others. In reality, I think a mission trip, especially a short-term mission trip, is much better when you feel like you received far more than you gave. You come back with that perspective, and not because you didn't try to give, of course, but when you kind of realize that it's really for the molding and changing of you and who you are. And I would say the most valuable thing, because we've had short-term people come to visit us, but we've had just families come, like a husband and wife, and bring their kids. So that it's not like a huge group. They can just come with us to our ministries, see what life is like. And that's really encouraging for us because we can show them what life is like here. Everything's a little more exciting when it's new again. Like for us, it's all very normal, but of course, for someone coming, it's very exciting. So as the people coming to a place on a short-term mission, look for ways that you can encourage not only the missionaries, but encourage the local congregation, the people you're working with.
Yeah, that's great. That kind of ties into what you said earlier of, I know like when I was in college, the local mission trips we went on was just kind of my way to check my list off that I'm a good Christian. You know, I did the whole mission trip thing. I'm following the David Platt radical pattern of going to the nations for my week at a time, and I think it's a beautiful thing to realize that it's good to do those things. It's good, obviously, to encourage missionaries and all those things. But live on mission in your neighborhood and go to your accountant's office and live on mission there. And it's a life of living on mission. That's great.
What are the ways that the church can support a missionary? Like, what do you guys need from the church back home?
Yeah, so obviously the first thing is just being willing to support people who are feeling called and wanting to step out into missions. So just being willing to support someone who wants to go to a mission internship program like AIM, or being willing to support us. That's a big first step. But I would say the biggest thing I encourage, and I've tried to do this with the churches that sponsor me that I work with, and I've been really blessed with great congregations, is build relationship. If it's only about a money transaction, there's not going to be much trust and there's not going to be much growth.
Yeah.
Because ideally, both sides are going to be growing from this. Mission church or house church is going to have a lot of things that are new and exciting. It can breathe energy into a congregation that's been around for a longer time, whereas a congregation that's been around for a long time will have experience and resources. So they kind of fit and encourage each other and help fill the needs of each other.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So building those relationships where it's not just a money transaction. Like I was talking to one of my teammates and I was asking some of these questions, just kind of curious of what how he would answer. And he was talking about a church that supports him, and they're not one of like his bigger financial supporters, but every time they write a newsletter, they respond to it and read it out loud at the church.
Wow.
And they interact with him every time. So he knows that they're always interacting with it. They're always thinking about him, praying for him. And that's so powerful to know people are thinking about us, to know people are praying for us, proud of us. All those sorts of things go a really long way. So just keeping that communication open. Another thing I would say is, this is something that most people can control in the church, but just in churches in general, especially for leadership, if they were listening to this, if you're supporting a missionary and commit to that, make sure you're doing it and doing it on time.
Yeah.
Because, for example, if you come to the end of the month, beginning of the month, and you look at your paycheck and 25% of it's missing,
Yeah,
That's not great, right? That's kind of hard. Or yeah, just a chunk of it's missing, and you don't know if you'll even ever receive it in the next check. So, like I said, I've been blessed. Those haven't been realities for me, but I know many missionaries that's a reality for. Every month is kind of a gamble of what's going to be the amount in my account this month.
Yeah.
Um, and that just adds unnecessary stress because you have the stress of living for us, like living in another country, doing all of these different transitions. But then you just have the stress of every month you don't know how much money you're going to end up with.
Yeah.
And I know it just slips through the cracks and like, oh, we'll send it when we get it, or oh, I forgot to send it this month, or different things of that nature. But those sorts of things to like really help a missionary out, that's a big one. It's just
Yeah.
if you're gonna give, just do it consistently, and do it on the same time every month, to the best of your ability. Because that really, I think we all know what it's like to feel financial stress, and it just makes everything else more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if someone feels like they're called in the ministry or they're called to do missions, what would your advice be to them? Like, what's your advice to younger Erik who's thinking about going in the mission field?
Yeah, so this one would depend a lot on the age of the person, their life situation. Is it a teenager who's still in high school? Is it a college student? Is it a married family with kids? Um, and not that I can give all the answers, I would suggest if someone was really interested in that, just for you to pass on their information to me or my information to them, and I'd be
Yeah,
happy
absolutely.
to talk with them about that. But I would say generally just reflect and kind of the biblical idea of count the cost. What is it going to cost, and why do I feel called to this?
Mm.
Is it I just really would like to see other countries. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fun, but maybe that's not necessarily a good reason alone just to try to want to do mission work. But is it something that you're feeling called to do? And then again, like if you're a teenager, there's different programs. There's different things like there's like AIM, and there's other ones too that can give you experience, that can give you training to help. And you work in that program, you work with a mentor. So it kind of helps you figure out, like the whole idea of AIM is to mentor with a missionary. So you kind of figure out if that's what you want to do long term, or okay, I had this experience, but maybe this isn't for me long term.
Yeah.
Would you
advise
formal
education the way you're kind of going into formal education with missions focused?
Yeah, I would say if you're wanting to do, especially if you're more the college age, and wanting, I would suggest going through some sort of training program. There's multiple of them. Like there's one in Dallas called Great Cities Missions that helps train missionaries, and they actually help put teams together and do team dynamics and different things of that nature too. So I would definitely suggest there to be some education, especially cultural education, too. If you're going to another country, there needs to be some education on what to expect in that and how to handle that.
Yeah.
Because many people are unaware of their own cultural ideas. Most people don't even really think about them having a culture. That's just the way life is. That's just the way things are done.
Right.
And it's not till you experience a different culture where you realize, oh, that's not just universal, the assumption in this situation or the right thing to do in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Obviously, language being a big barrier, but that's part of that. I guess normally that part of that 3-year learning process is learning the language. You guys kind of had an advance on that, but I imagine that's part of the beginning process as well, where you go.
Oh yeah, learning a language is really key if you're going to a place that speaks another language, because language connects with culture a lot.
Right.
Language and culture very heavily intertwined. So for example, in Spanish, there's 2 different ways to say you. There's the formal and informal. So respect is built into the language. So when I'm speaking to someone who's older than me, it's better to use the more respectful language compared, where in English we don't really have respectful or non-respectful language. We have certain things, we'll say maybe ma'am or different things of that, especially in the South.
Yeah.
Sir and ma'am. But again, it's not built into our language where we have different conjugations for our verbs.
Right.
we conjugate the verb different because we're saying it one way or the other. So really learning the language is a key if you want to be able to do that.
Yeah, this has been great, man. I've looked forward to this for a long time, and haven't known you all that long, but already feel like you're a good friend of mine, and look forward to a lot of years of a relationship in the future and continued service with you guys, and hope to do more. Hope to be more connected with you guys in the future. Very very thankful for all you guys are doing. It's incredible the work that you're doing in Mexico, and I can't imagine a lot of the difficulties that you guys are facing, and so we just wanted to encourage you, brother, and to thank you for all you're doing, and know that we're praying for you constantly and laboring alongside you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's good talking with you guys again, to see you guys face to face as much as you can through Zoom. But
Yeah,
share
no
some of
doubt.
these things. But yeah, my final kind of encouragement is just find a place that you can serve people. Most of the time we sum up missions and think of passages like, oh, the Great Commission, go and make disciples,
Yeah.
or send me, I'll go. Those, but really, the greatest missional text I can think of is Philippians 2, talking about Jesus taking the form of a servant. That's the greatest example, humility and service. So there's all sorts of missional texts all throughout the Bible. You just have to look for them.
That's beautiful, Eric. That's beautiful. That's a great way to end, man. I appreciate it so much. We'll talk
Yeah,
to
it
you
was good
soon.
talking with you guys. Hope to talk to you
All right.
again soon.
All right, brother.
We are so thankful for Eric and his wife Neva and the work that they're doing, and we want to be a church here at Ohatchee that is involved in those things as much as we can, relationally, financially, and all those things, and we want to increase that and hope that we can do that. If you're interested in helping Eric and Neva or supporting them in any way, or just checking them out and following them, we're going to link the Facebook page below. It's Bishops on Mission is their Facebook page, and you can get in touch with them. If you're interested in missions at all, again, Eric just said he's more than willing to talk to you. He'd love to talk to you about those things and what that looks like, and whatever stage of life you're in, what that may look like for you, and the challenges or whatever it is that you may need to know. You can reach out to him, and I know he'd love to talk to you. If we can help you with anything at all, of course, you can always reach out to us as well. Thanks for listening. You got anything you want to say?
Nope.
Okay.
Leches in the MJ.
Leches.
That was good, man. I think that's going to be interesting.
I like doing that stuff. I need to do it with Caleb soon.